And this one is Get Set for Travel's Restart, in conjunction with Travel Weekly, who will be covering the session yet again. And we've got Juliet Dennis, Chief Reporter, with us today. And please ensure you've all signed up to receive Travel Weekly's print magazine and keep updated to what's happening in the industry as it recovers from COVID. There'll also be a story at some point over the next few days, weren't there, Jules, which will appear, okay, fantastic, online. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Barbara Kolosinska, also known as Basha, from C&M Recruitment, and I'm delighted to be joined by my fellow panelists and very good friends, Ami Naru from Travlaw and Claire Steiner, my co-board director from ITT and HR professionals. So ladies, would you like to introduce yourselves, please, with a bit of an overview?
After you, Claire.
I think you kind of just said it all, Bash. Yeah, so hi everybody, for those who don't know me. My name's Claire Steiner. I have spent the last 30 odd years in HR, 5 of which have been predominantly in the tourism space, working with a range of businesses across that sector. And I also do an awful lot around talent and the emerging generations and bringing them into the industry. So it's a pleasure to be here again and looking forward to an exciting session.
And Ami?
Hi, morning everyone. My name's Ami Nara. I'm a partner and head of employment at Travlaw. I think most of you will be familiar with my face popping up on various webinars over the last year or so. But for those of you who don't know, I specialise in providing advice to employers solely in the travel industry. So from the point of recruitment and in terms of contracts, right the way through to the other end in terms of terminations and when it's time to say goodbye and anything that falls in between.
All the juicy stuff. Just a bit of housekeeping, thank you, ladies. Before we move on, please keep your mics on mute. We will be having hand raising, or you can also ask questions in the chat room below. I'm sure you all know how to do that. So ask some questions below there. We've got lots of questions we're going to be asking today. Raise your hand, and if you're brave enough and we've got the time, we'll actually get you to on video yourselves and come live on stage if you want to as well. We will also be recording today's session for those of you that need to nip off or take a call. That will be recording it and posting it onto all our social media platforms. So let's crack on. As you probably know, at C&M, we've really been trying to ensure that we've been supportive, collaborative and informative in the industry for the last year, especially with the expertise and professionalism we've got from Claire and from Ami. And I hope it's been of use and it's been thought-provoking and also helpful to all of you that are either in an HR position or running your own businesses as well. So it's obviously employment law, HR, recruitment, careers, all that part of what we all look after. Since our last webinar, so much has happened in the industry, and obviously this week is a really, really important week for that roadmap out of the awful pandemic we've been in, for the industry and also for the world as well. We thought it would be a great idea today, as it's perfect timing, of course, because it's that roadmap out. And rather than a presentation, which we have historically done, as I'm sure you know, we thought we'd have a really relaxed Q&A, me grilling the ladies. You guys, please put questions below as to how to set our businesses up for coming out of what we have been through, but also what we need to ensure that we are covering, looking after, making sure that all our ducks are in a row, both from an HR and a legal perspective and employment law point of view. Okay, let's get cracking. It's been an interesting one for those of us employing staff and running businesses, and it's an absolute minefield. I know I only run a relatively small business, but it's an absolute minefield for those HR professionals and business leaders of you out there who I know must have been very, very busy for numerous reasons, be it furlough. I'm just have to put my battery in. My battery's running out. That's good, isn't it? Oh dear. That's a nice blooper. I've got a notification. For those of you that are running businesses and so on. So it's a difficult one, but it's an exciting time as well. But we just need to make sure that we're doing everything correctly. The world is opening. People are beginning to travel. I know the traffic light system has been Interesting this week. We've just had a quick chat about it earlier, and goodness knows what's going on, whether we're allowed to go if we're in the amber, if we're not, what the law says, what that lovely Mr. Grant Shapps says, and so on. And I know many companies are seeing bookings coming in, and I know some companies have actually got people travelling this week, which is fantastic news. So first and foremost, Amy and Claire, I'd like to ask you, how are things in both of your worlds at the moment? What's happening and what's happening at the moment, before we get into the specifics and the nitty and gritty, but what's happening in your world that's relevant to our audience today?
I can start that one. I think Amy will probably have a few more of the sort of legality issues around it. I think the people I work with and the questions I'm getting asked most are mainly around a cautious reopening of the workspace. And I think people are nervous about reopening, particularly in our sector, and that is largely due to the continuing mixed messages that we're getting from government around, how the industry will open up. I think particular sectors that are, I think, really are struggling in some respects more than leisure travel is the TMC world, business travel world, because there's been some businesses that have been fairly consistent. They've had to, their kind of client base has continued to travel, but obviously they're waiting for the world to open up. A lot of their clients are nervous again. They may have a duty of care or they have a duty of care to their staff around traveling. And how do you balance that with getting your staff who potentially have been on furlough for the last 14, 15 months back ready to go when you still are in this area with you've got no income coming in, but you have to be ready for a start, because we all know, and we're all very, optimistic based on years of experience, that when we come back, we'll come back quickly. But I think I think the thing is, normally, if we've had issues in the past, some of the terrible things we have consistently had to deal with as a sector, they've been relatively short-lived. You're talking weeks and maybe a few months, but this has been a long, long time. And I think none of us, just that whole, how we get ourselves back up and running to potentially full strength in a relatively short period of time with people who have lost touch with the business, maybe reevaluating things, it's difficult. And I think this is a time that HR has proven its worth, but I think we have a harder road ahead of us. And I know I have a lot of my fellow HR people on here that I know well, who I hope will agree with what I'm saying.
I'm sure a lot can. I don't know if there's going to be any TMCs out there. I think there might be a couple. It'd be quite interesting to get their points if I just want to make some chat at the bottom. But Amy, as well, just a general overview from you.
Yeah, I think everything that Claire's just said. I think the last year is probably the hardest year in many HR professionals' careers, and that of small business owners. There's been so much that they've had to get their head around, and quickly. If you think about this time last year, it was, what's furlough? How does it work? What does it mean? Can we use it? Getting this, that, and the other. How do we make redundancies? The shift now is very much away from that, because most people know how the furlough scheme works. We know how long it's there for. Most people are familiar with how to make redundancies because they've probably already gone through that. But now the focus is very much on opening up the workplace and the issues that brings with it. Working from home, and whether that's the new norm and whether people can insist on carrying on working from home. And then things that are coming out as a direct consequence in terms of staff from the traffic light system, and what employers can and can't do with respect to their own staff. And it's a bit of a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because most of the people on this webinar will be the travel industry. So on the one hand, we want to advocate that people should be going on holiday, people should be booking holidays and installing confidence in the public. But we've also got to manage that with managing our own workforce and what happens when staff do go to an amber country and when they come back. So a whole mixture of issues that yet again are causing some employers headaches.
And we're going to dive deeper into all of these points. Interesting one on furlough and redundancies. I think all of us are now experts, obviously not as much as some of you HR professionals out there, but it is an interesting one now, isn't it? Now we're at that next stage is when do we bring people back, especially those that aren't busy, like TMCs, but the business is coming, and it's having that balance of, okay, we need to be ready, we need to have the people back. We've still got the luxury and the buffer of furlough up until September, but we need to make sure that all our ducks in a row are in a row, ready for that business to bounce back, and it's having that balance, isn't it? So bringing people back into the office, I, for one, am going to be introducing and have introduced a flexible working model, closed in office and so on. And I think a lot of the employers and companies out there, those of in the audience, are doing the same. What should we as employers be thinking about when bringing people back into the office, be it from a spatial point of view to making sure that we're COVID friendly, to even the contracts and things? What should we be thinking about first and foremost, Amy?
I think the first thing is that you cannot bring anyone back into the workplace until you've done a COVID, and it's got to be COVID risk assessment, not a normal health and safety risk assessment. It's got to be a COVID specific risk assessment. And there's a lot of guidance on the government's website, and the government have been working very closely with the health and safety executives. So we were all aware from last year that there were 5 practical steps. So work from home if you can, the risk assessments, maintaining social distancing, maintaining transmission risk, and reinforcing cleaning processes. Most employers are familiar with those because at some point last year, I think the majority of employers did open up their doors. On the back of that, there are now, I believe, 14 government guidance papers, depending on the work setting that you operate in. And there's one particular, for example, for office workers. So employers need to keep an eye on that. There are also 8 priority actions that employees should be looking at. And interestingly, at the latter part of last year, mental health and wellbeing was added on to that list. So there's all of that side that needs to be looked at. But then it's, once you've done that, you need to have open dialogue with your staff, and you need to open up those communication channels so that they feel confident and they feel willing and able to return back to the workplace. And there will be the odd situation or the odd individual, for whatever their particular circumstances are, doesn't quite feel comfortable. And again, you need to have that dialogue, and you need to understand why it is that they don't feel that they can come into work, and what you as an employer can do. So it's very much about working in unison together.
Yeah, I think, and I know I bash on about communication all the time, but it is absolutely critical, more so than ever at the moment. A lot of my businesses, we've been running anonymous employee surveys to ask the staff how they're feeling. Some businesses obviously have already started to bring staff back from furlough. Some actually may have been lucky and managed to keep everybody on. Others may have people that have been on long-term furlough. And now's the time to really start that communication properly about that reintegration. There's so many different things to think about. And I know that a lot of people here will know this already, but it's, the people who've been on furlough actually are going to, even if they're excited about coming into the office, they're going to be nervous for a number of different reasons. One would be just because they're going to have a big catch up ahead of them. 2 would be actually, do they want to come back? Have they done a reevaluation? They're going to be anxious, and that's going to increase as the whole mental health issues. I also think that there's been a big thing recently, a lot, very public in the press, not just the travel press, but the national media, around a number of people now thinking about next stage of redundancy as furlough winds down. And I think, the really, to be very blunt about it, a lot of businesses, they've kept their key staff, a lot of their staff that are still there, potentially they're a key staff. Doesn't mean the staff they've lost are terrible, don't get me wrong with that, but the real high performers, the ones that they've wanted to keep, are going to be there. And I think employers have got this to think about as well. This is another part of the picture, which is how do we make sure that we can balance that, where, because travel and tourism has been so badly affected, we are going to be heavily reliant continually on the furlough scheme. I don't think it's going to be extended any further. I don't know if Amy agrees with me that. I really don't. I think, we've called for so long as a sector for our own support. Don't think that's ever going to happen. I think we've lost the fight on that one. Sadly, I believe we should have. I think we've been let down, but I think that's happened. And so I think, there's that additional, there's all these different things you've got to think about how your staff are thinking, whether, be they on furlough, on flexi furlough, or have continued working, along with all the other stuff we thought about around how the ones who've been working potentially burnt out because they've had to keep going and cover everything. So communication is absolutely essential to find out how everyone is feeling about this. And it is things about coming back to work. And if they don't want to come back to work, why don't they come back to work? Because there could be some genuine reasons, and I know Amy will expand on the sort of the legal protections around that or not, and what rights employers have got to do. But it's a big picture now. And I think we've got, again, going on, so there's a lot of work ahead of us over the next few weeks to
get very busy, aren't you?
Yeah.
I think the mental, sorry, Amy.
I was just going to add on to the point that Claire's just made about indirectly, employers have effectively split their workforce into two. So those that have been on furlough and those that have remained at work. And, you know, there are two effective camps on, and the people that are coming back from furlough thinking, well, why was I put on furlough? Does that mean that my job's secure coming forwards? And, you know, part of them will be feeling a bit nervous. And then you've got the other side of the coin, which is resentment for the fact that their colleagues have been having basically all this time off. I can't say it's sunny at the moment, but last year it was pretty good, wasn't it? And we've been working hard to keep this ship sailing. So what are we going to get in return for it? So there is that whole integration bit. On your point about whether furlough is going to be extended further, Claire, I don't think it will be. It's been going now for 18 months. And if you recall this time last year when the first extension was made, Rishi Sunak then was adamant that was going to be the last and final extension. I think if the measures in terms of coming out of this whole pandemic go according to plan, I don't think it will be extended. Whether there'll be a job support scheme in place after that, I'm not entirely sure. But who can predict what this government's going to do next?
Exactly. I think the mental health and well-being point that one of you raised is really, really critical as well. Especially those that are coming back into the office that haven't been in the office. And that's something I think we all as employers need to be very mindful of. I'm just wondering if there are any implications on their contracts or anything like that as well, that do us as employers have to incorporate something like that related to COVID because of it? I don't know. Is that something that employers should be thinking about, or is it if it's just covered already amongst their contracts?
There are already implied terms of duty of care that employers have towards their staff, health and safety, a duty towards health and safety. And those are, you know, it's not just confined to what the contract has in place. These duties were already there, but they've been compounded, and employers have to think about this in a slightly different way now. So, you know, you've talked about integrating people back into the workplace. You know, many employers will have staff that have been on furlough for the best part of a year, more so because the travel industry will be like, we need these people, we don't want to let them go, but it's just when can we get them back? When can we get them back? And you know, things that employees need to be thinking about here are training. You know, you can ask staff to do training whilst they're on furlough. And, you know, I know when I took a year off maternity leave, coming back and working out how to put the computer on took me, you know, the best part of 10 minutes, or it should take 2 seconds. So that time can be utilised in terms of upskilling and whatnot. Obviously, individuals on furlough can't do training if it's generating revenue for their employer.
Yeah. I mean, I know for one, as an employer, I've got all my guys that are currently back that are almost full time. I've got all my furlough guys due back week after next, which is very exciting. But they have been on furlough for over a year, and I'm sure a lot of the employers out there are also feeling the same. That exactly your point, Claire, was are the furlough going to be bitter that they weren't working, or vice versa? Are the unfurloughed guys going to feel, well, I've had to work for a year and you guys are coming back? But also brings on to the point of integrating people again into the belly of the business, the culture, how you do things. And actually a lot of us are doing things as businesses very differently to how we were before. So that's, I'm sure, also an interesting thing, and something I think we all need to think about as employers is how are we going to retrain, integrate all these guys that pretty much, I mean, they haven't been sitting at home in the sunshine, but they haven't been working, bar the odd bit of training. So that's a challenge as well, isn't it?
No, absolutely. I mean, I've got a few clients, and I'd be really interested if people were willing to share what they're doing actually on here. But some of them have actually now started thinking very seriously about the people who have been on long-term furlough. They're starting to bring them back like 1 day a week or 1 day a month even, and they're buddying them up with people in the business as well, because I think there is that them and us that Amy would mention just now about people who've been there. And I think, you know, there is that whole reintegration. Businesses have fundamentally changed in the last 14 months and will change coming out of this. So that whole reintegration of the people who haven't been there and aware, irrespective of the town halls and the you know, the fun staff things that have happened. So there is that side of it. I think the other thing is that where businesses are starting to think about, you know, people coming back and flexi work, you know, this sort of hybrid working that most businesses will be looking at. You know, now again, the conversations need to start happening now. You know, what do people actually want? It doesn't mean that you as a business have to accept that, but actually you're going to be hard pressed, one, to say no hybrid working, because you know, everyone's proven that it can work. You know, there are some people that that actually, you know, the whole sort of, you know, excitement and the ease of working from home has started to wane a bit, and a bit like, do you know what, even if I don't want to have to commute an hour into London every day, I kind of want to do it now because I'm bored and I need to get out. But there are other people who think differently to that and sort of take that on another stage. I think, again, looking into the future, I think employers need to really start thinking very seriously about how they need to ensure that staff who potentially they allow to work longer at home and less in the office, and those who want to work in the office more and less at home, how you make sure those groups are treated equally, and because there will be HR issues that will arise from that. And then the final point I just wanted to make was back on what we were talking, picking up on Amy's point about the COVID secure offices. Another thing I'm doing a lot of at the moment is I'm producing COVID policies for the workplace. So actually what the business, you know, specifically around COVID, what does it mean when you're in the office? What does it mean when you're visiting clients, or clients are coming into the office? All those sorts of things. And all of those policies all have the caveat, this policy will change.
Yeah, I think that's key, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think from our perspective from recruitment, and we're working to about 20% capacity, as in what we usually work on vacancy wise. Some clients out there in the audience working with us now, most companies are giving the option of flexible working because candidates are now expecting it. Because they have had that balance and that flexibility. Most candidates are expecting it when going for a job, and most roles that are landing on our desks are now offering a level of flexible home working. It also, if you are currently hiring or looking to hire in the future, it also widens the candidate pool of, you know, if you are based in the remote part of the UK, if you're looking to perhaps be a bit more remote and have that person only working in the office once or twice, so the journey is not so long, they can perhaps live a little bit longer away.
You need to, you know, Amy talked about training. I think the other part of that equation as well is making sure that even though we've done it for the last 14 months, it's been always in the back of our head, this is a bit temporary, we're going to let things slide a bit because we're all in this situation. But actually, as it becomes more formalised and becomes more long-term, managers and team leaders and staff will need training on really how to properly support people in a hybrid working environment. And there are health and safety stuff around that as well, which I'm sure we'll cover.
We do have a comment as opposed to a question in the chat room from Marco De Rivo. I think we can all see it. Remote working while there was no business is very different from remote working when business will start again. And I think, I'm sure we all agree with that. I think as employers, having that remote home working model prior to the pandemic, everyone was a bit cautious. Home working, are people just putting their feet up and taking advantage? I, for one, as an employer, have actually seen the benefit that people working from home it gives them, because it gives them a little bit of more flexibility working from home, and they still do their hours, and actually they get more. I get more out of them, they put more in. But I think it totally depends on the relationship, the trust element that you've got with your employees. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Amy or Claire.
Yeah, I think it really depends from employer to employer, you know, from what size you are as to how much of an impact or issue it has. There are clearly benefits from working from home, but equally there are some drawbacks from it, okay? And, you know, in most organisations, you'll find for every one person who's very keen to work from home, there'll be another person who's keen to get back into the workplace because they feel isolated, they feel lonely, that they like that camaraderie of coming into the workplace. And ultimately, you know, yes, it's all very fashionable and on vogue at the moment, hybrid working and working from home. Whether this is still going to be the case in 2-3 years down the time, I don't know. But let's just go back to the legal position, okay? And that's primarily what I'm here to focus on is there is no automatic legal right to work from home, okay? You can only do it with agreement and consent of your employer. And when we talk about flexible working, that flexible working request option has been in place for quite a while, as long as you've got 26 weeks service. Okay, traditionally it used to be you could only make a request if you had childcare responsibilities or caring responsibilities. That was taken away because the government were, you know, ahead of the curve in some respect in trying to implement this on a wider scale. But just because someone's got the right to request flexibly, and what I mean by flexibly is where they work, the hours they work, the days they work, doesn't mean that they have the automatic right to work the request that they've put in. And that's where the employer and the employee have to get into some sort of dialogue. They have to have a meeting, they have to discuss it. But what I think will happen is that employers are going to find it a little bit more difficult now to push those requests back, because most people will have proved that they can make it work to some extent.
Yeah. And that's a really fair point, actually. Just because they request it, if it doesn't work in our working model and our businesses, then and we have got a valid reason to refuse it, then we can.
Yeah.
Marco actually put his hand up. Marco, would you like to take to the stage? And oh, here we go. Hi, Marco. How are you today?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm very good. Thank you very much.
Would you like to introduce yourself and
Yes.
where you're from and give us your question?
I'm a company director for Mickey Travel. We're based in London, and we are an international travel company. And I wanted just to clarify my point. I wasn't just talking about trust towards the employee. They're not going to put their feet up. I'm talking about the level of support and engagement that you can create remotely. It's very different from the one that you have in a buzzing and noisy office. So replicate that. We will need to change how we do things, how we monitor and supervise people, and how you support them. Everybody says, yes, I can work remotely. I've done it for a year, but with no business in hand, it's a completely different environment than when you are having thousands of people on the road traveling, a lot of troubleshooting and sorting out things. The junior people will need more support from the senior, and not being face to face is not going to be the same. We will need to find and adapt in ways. So I want to say that we are not ready to work remotely as such. We will have to experiment and change when the business really comes back.
I think that's a really important point that you've just made, Marco, because everyone's for, oh, let's work from home, but a lot of the processes that need to be put in place to make that work really well. So have you thought about how you can do appraisals? How you can do appraisals when someone's sat at home, and how well do they work when you're not seeing them for, you know, days and weeks and months on end? What have you thought about your onboarding process? You know, because to have someone in the office sit around the table and explain how the company works and this, that, and the other is a lot easier than doing it remotely. So all of those processes and the issues that you've identified, Marco, they really need to be ironed out, thought about very carefully if working from home is going to be here for the long term.
That's a really fair point about onboarding and newbies as well. How can a newbie, and we're all travel people, aren't we, right? We're all people. We've all been in the travel industry for many, many years. And I know I miss my team. I can see one of my team in the audience here greatly. And it's fantastic when we see each other. So I don't think it will be a total flexible home working. It can't be, because also if you're running a call center or a creative marketing team or product team or something like that, you can't really bounce ideas off each other. You can't brainstorm as much and so on. So I totally am with you there, Marco. I totally get where you're coming from. Sorry, Claire, over to you.
Yeah, no. I think I was also going to pick up on the onboarding point. I mean, I know people who, you know, started a job in lockdown and and have never been into their office and have never met their colleagues face to face. So they probably are looking forward to that. But I think there are some hurdles around that as well, and expectations and how that's managed. And then also to pick up, I think on the point you were making, Basha, I mean, I think, you know, we can all agree that work-life balance as a rule tends to be better for people who have the flexibility of working. I think flexible working is a great thing in whatever form it is, not necessarily all working from home. But I think we have, you know, one of the pushes, and I found this with managers who traditionally were like, well, you know, the sort of people who thought they were sitting at home with their legs up, you know, their feet up, are actually, you know, trying to change the way they think and saying it's not about presenteeism, it's about output. And I the worry that we've seen and an increase we've seen actually for people at home has been presenteeism as well, because they're worried that they're not being seen. They're worried that they need to prove that they're doing stuff. So they're even longer at their desk, and that's not healthy at all. So it's got to be around outputs. And that's where and you mentioned trust, and that's where the trust comes in. And I think it has been a fundamental shift. I know a lot of, HR people will agree, because I know most of us have been banging the drum about this for a long time. But, you do have some managers that, they need to know that their staff are online at 9 a.m. and are there until 5:36 p.m. because that, when they're in the office, that's what they see, and they see it. And actually, it's not about that at all. It's about, are they doing their job? Are they doing it well? Are they achieving their goals? Are they meeting the KPIs? Whatever it is. If they're doing that, then that's okay. And if they start at 10:30 and work until 8 o'clock at night, that's fine, because it works for them. What you don't want is the ones who are starting at 8 a.m. and working until 10 p.m. to try and make it look like they're doing really well. And that's another thing I think that we need to, really seriously consider and sadly have seen. And that's a massive contributor to mental health issues as well. The whole presenteeism.
The output point, I think that's really, really key. And also flexible working, like you say, isn't just working from home. Flexible working is job sharing, staggered start times, and so on. Flexible working means lots of different, has lots of different.
I've got a couple of businesses who are starting to seriously think about 4-day weeks.
Yeah, I know a few companies that are out of travel that are 4-day weeks.
Yeah, 4-day weeks.
In 5 days work, but in 4 days. Yeah. Okay, so moving forward. Sorry, Amy, were you about to say something? No. So we're out of the pandemic. We can start traveling again. All our staff want to start coming back. We're going to offer some flexible working. Can staff refuse to come back into the office if we say we want you back in 3, 4, even 5 days?
Depends what the reason is as to why they're refusing to come back into the office.
What if they just don't want to? They're scared. They're worried about COVID.
Okay, then. If they haven't got any underlying reasons, such as they're clinically vulnerable, in which case, it might be acceptable that they continue to work from home, and they're just being a bit overly nervous, then that goes back to the point I made right at the outset. Do your COVID risk assessment, have open dialogue, work out why is it, put their mind at ease that we've done this, we've done that, we've got social distancing in place, we've got all the COVID measures in place. If they're still being obstructive, and there will be individuals who basically say, well, it's my right now, you can't force me to come back to work. In that situation, it's a reasonable management instruction, isn't it? That they, if you're asking them reasonably as a manager or as an employee to do something, they're objecting to it, then you could end up in the territory of dismissal and disciplinary action. But that comes with a big word of caution. And the reason I say that is because you've got to work out, is it a genuine concern about health and safety, in which case they will be automatically they will be, if you dismiss them, it will be an automatic unfair dismissal. Okay, so they are protected from raising health and safety issues, but they've got to, in order to get that protection, it's got to be a serious and imminent threat at, that's putting them at the point at which they can't come into work. And that serious and imminent threat, if you've got a COVID risk assessment in place and you've looked at all of these factors, it's going to be very difficult for them to say, well, my employer was forcing me to come back into work and I considered myself at a serious and imminent risk. So work with them, try and put their mind at ease, and when you do get the odd situation where someone's being completely obstructive, then I think you need to take proper advice, because this is where a lot of case law is going to evolve over the coming months.
I haven't got the concern in my business, but I am thinking, could that be the case moving forward with some businesses where you've got some staff that might take advantage of it, that might be more militant? Could this open a whole can of worms for employers, that a member of staff might just do it for the sake of it and then go for unfair dismissal, etc. Claire, what's your point of view?
Yeah, no, I can only reiterate what Amy said. I think, case law is going to determine a lot of this over the next few months. When we start seeing these things happen publicly, and maybe tribunals and the laws, the courts deciding on what employers should be doing, I think these cases, again, communication is vital, but it's also thinking about the grounds of what's reasonable as well. And I mean, you know, Ami's quite right. You have to, if there's an imminent threat and you haven't done your COVID risk assessment, well, you know already you haven't got a leg to stand on. But actually, what is reasonable in the circumstances? And that's often, you know, one of those sort of litmus tests things. I mean, reasonable is you know, one person's view of reasonable is another person's, but you know, the courts will look at that as an employer. How have you been have you acted reasonably? And also the duty of care, you know, have you thought about the protection of your staff, the reasons why, and had that dialogue? You know, just these blanket, no, this is how it's going to be and that's it, kind of directives from both sides actually are going to wind you up really in hot water.
Yeah, on that point, Claire, I think it's also worth mentioning that absolutely what you say, and just because a tribunal or a court found in that particular situation it was that particular decision was right or wrong, it doesn't follow that it's going to be the same. It's got to be in your situation with particular facts and circumstances of your situation that they will look at. And let's not forget, you know, it normally takes in a normal world at least 6 months before a claim being lodged in a tribunal and a judgment being given. At the moment, there's a big backlog. You're looking at a year, 18 months. So we're not going to get a lot of these decisions until somewhere probably in 2022 when it's going to be too late. So work with the facts and circumstances that you got and always try and be reasonable, because that's ultimately what a tribunal is looking at.
Yeah.
Of course, come to you both for legal and HR advice as well.
Yeah,
okay. Sorry, Claire.
No, it's okay. It's fine.
I think we've had a few new people join. So those of you that weren't here at the beginning, then please feel free to ask questions in the chat room or raise your hand and come onto the screen if you'd like to ask some questions. Okay, so we've got our people back. We've negotiated all their contracts. We've now got the traffic light system in place. Can employers request to know where their staff are going on holiday, be it they go to amber, or be it they go to red?
I think the key point here is explaining to your staff why it is you need to know. Okay, now there are several implications as to why employers need to know. Because if staff are going to, let's say, for example, amber or red, they will probably have to isolate when they come back. Then the question is, can they do work from home? Is it fair to allow them to do work from home? So that needs to be factored in. But also, you know, we need to know where they're going, because we don't want them rocking up in the workplace after they've come back. So there's a health and safety and a duty of care issue. So, you know, once you've explained that, I think it's perfectly acceptable to amend your annual leave request form and put destination on there, for example, or change your holiday policy to say that for these reasons, this is why we need to know. So, Claire, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I mentioned sort of COVID policies, and that's certainly something that we're covering off in those, which is right. And, you know, we talked about duty of care and the duty of care of the employer, but actually that's the other way, it goes the other way as well. So as an employee, you have a duty of care. And so, you know, it is you're covered within, if you like, the scope of the employment contract to make sure that you're not creating issues. So, you know, just nipping off to see, you know, and again, I mean, we're saying, you know, the reasons they travel, they're going to be different, but, you know, some people might have a real need to get to a red destination. But if they have that conversation with you and you know why they're going, then it's that, you know, there's never that one size fits all. I mean, there are always going to be issues from it, particularly if you've just sort of made an edict that, you know, everyone has to be in at work and not working from home full time. And then you're saying, but if you go on holiday and you can quarantine for 10 days when you get back and work from home, everyone's a bit like, well, hold on a sec.
Interesting if they have to travel for business for that company, be it they're contracting a hotel, they've got an issue with some reps or something, and suddenly the country goes into green to amber or amber to red, you know, that would be quite an interesting scenario that employers and, you know, MDs of travel companies have to deal with. What should employers be communicating to staff about this annual leave? So they're back, you've got everybody sorted. Well, first of all, I know that we've all got quite an interesting situation to deal with all the holiday that people have accrued. That's one challenge, I think. So I wouldn't mind your opinion on that, Claire. But also, what should we as employers be communicating to our staff about annual leave and COVID and the traffic light system and so on?
I think going back to that accruing of holiday, I'm hoping, and we've spoken about this in previous webinars, and there's been a lot out there. I hope that by now most employers would have got around that by actually requesting that their staff take holiday whilst they're on furlough. You know, you're absolutely allowed to do that. You just have to make sure you give them twice as much notice as the amount they want to take, and you have to make sure that you'll top up their salaries to 100% during that time that they're off. So
and we've still got enough time until the end of September to be able to do.
So when they come back, there should, you know, you shouldn't have that much of an issue. You know, you should hopefully, and I do. If people haven't done that, they need to really start thinking about that now, and following the law. I think at the other end of it are these people who've been keeping the company going, and actually, you know, they may go, oh God, everyone's coming back. That means I can go on holiday. Well, actually, it might not, because you might need them to stay on to help integrate the other staff. So there are issues around that. So you really need to start thinking about how you're going to manage that holiday right now. And holiday it's not about jetting. I mean, obviously for most of us, it's lovely to think we're going to jet off to somewhere sunny, but holidays is about a break from work. It's about giving people that chance to rest, not look at their computers, not worry about things, and you know, it's and that's exactly why the law enforces us to make sure that people have holidays.
It's actually really difficult, isn't it? I mean, I know as an employer, sorry, Amy, but they can't go away at the moment. Well, they can go to a few places, maybe the UK, if they can get a deal. They take holiday, they're just at home. I think most of us, as members of staff or even as employers, you tend to work even when you're on holiday. And I think that really needs to be reiterated to our members of staff. If you're off on holiday, be it just at home on holiday, you're not working, and turn the laptop off, do not take calls. And I think that's difficult for all of us in the travel industry, because we all live, breathe it. We all pretty, you know, we're not 9 to 5, 30 years, are we?
It's a really interesting point that you just raised, and it's going back to the point that Claire was making about effectively when people are working from home, they're living at work. And those boundaries of am I at work have been really blurred. It's had a really knock-on effect on people's mental health. And I know employers are now actually addressing this and saying, and sending out communication to their staff, which is, we do not want you working on holiday. You know, put your hours that you work on the bottom of your email signature so that your colleagues know, that your clients know. You know, if you've got internal WhatsApp groups, for example, and you don't want to respond, or you want to remove yourselves from them, that's fine. We understand that the whole work-life balance situation has become blurred. But going back to your other point that you made about what should employers be communicating to staff regarding taking of annual leave, I think it's really about, they need to be clear what the consequences are of when they come back, and if they have to quarantine. Are they going to be allowed to work from home? And is that fair to allow some people to work from home, particularly where you've got a workforce where some people can't work from home, and in that situation they'd have to take annual leave or unpaid leave? Or will they be allowed to work from home, or will they be told to take unpaid leave, or you know, will they be allowed to make up the time? What happens if they have to quarantine? They're allowed to work from home and they're working from one of these quarantine hotels. Have you thought about the practicalities around that? You know, all of this needs to be thought through, and people need to be booking these holidays with their eyes wide open, as wide as they can, in terms of what's going on with government restrictions and traffic lights, but also the consequences of what happens when they come back into the country. And
I think the key is being consistent, isn't it, and making sure it's a fair rule for all, and asking staff whether to work during, be it quarantine, self-isolation and so on. It's only if it's possible. But then if you're asking staff member A and they've got they've got the ability to work from home, and the job they do is possible to do from home, great. But you have staff member B that doesn't have the infrastructure at home, they've got lots of kids and animals, etc., around, and their job involves being in the office, then you've got a real disparity of how you treat both members of staff, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why you need to be upfront and say that people know about what the situation is. And also, you know, if they can't work from home for whatever reason, or you've got a carte blanche rule across the board that you're not going to allow people to work from home if they are quarantining, unlikely we would probably impose that, particularly in the travel industry, because we do want to encourage people to go. You know, what are the consequences of that? What are they entitled to pay, for example? You know, if they can't work from home and they're not ill, then in a nutshell, no, they're not entitled to pay. You know, and what have you as an employer thought about that in terms of you know, have you got a policy on it? Have you communicated to your staff about it? Do they even know, or are you just going to deal with it on an as and when basis, as and when it comes up?
Yeah, and I think to sort of throw other things into that, I know that, you know, a couple of friends of mine who are in the industry who are going away to amber destinations are going to do the test to release. So actually, they've worked out with their employer that they don't have to necessarily have the 10 days off. They'll do the test to release, which means they can effectively come back to work. They've negotiated that they won't work during that time. But then, of course, if they test positive, then there's the whole, you know, you then sort of go, obviously that's the whole sickness thing. But I think, you know, there are other options as well that are out there. And as sadly we know, those rules around quarantine are you know, will continue to change and you know, be murky and difficult to navigate. But I think, you know, there's those other things that we can think of as employers around.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's hope in 2 weeks on Monday, we get some further green countries coming onto the list, which I think we will, fingers crossed. You mentioned testing there, Claire. So can us as employers insist our staff take tests, be it they come into the office or they're working from home? Amy.
Okay, so obviously the government have, you know, all these lateral flow tests that you can get hold of now. And I think at the beginning of April, it was employers could get hold of them. They encourage it, okay? But it's not a legal requirement and you cannot make it mandatory. You've got to ask yourselves, why is there a need for us to do testing? If you've got social distancing measures in place and a secure work environment, do you really need testing in place? There will be some environments, so if you think about the care sector, where there probably is a more heightened need to do testing because social distancing can't be maintained. Again, you know, ask yourselves why you need to do it. Most likely you will get consent from your staff, but even when you do, you know, then you've got issues regarding data protection. You know, what are you going to do with the results? How are you going to process them? And so it's not as straightforward as, right, we're going to test everyone. There are benefits of that because obviously employees can see that you're maintaining a safe working environment, but it just needs a bit more care and thought out process. And also, interestingly, ACAS have been working really hard behind the scenes, so they've got a guide on testing. They've also got a guide on long COVID. They've got a guide on mental health as a result of COVID. So I would urge you to have a quick read of those guides that they put out there.
Yeah, no, they're really useful. I've been reading those guides, and I think, and actually for even the HR people here, you know, send them out to your managers, so get your management team to read them as well, because I think it's really important that senior people in the businesses understand this as well. So yes, you know, those businesses that do have HR functions, that's your job, that's your role to make sure the business is managed effectively in that side of it. But I think in these sorts of things, it's probably quite useful for them to read the guidance, because I think sometimes when work gets back online, everyone gets a bit more focused on just getting back to normal and forgetting that the things, and in particular, I think, you know, testing is part of it, but the whole long COVID thing as well. I think if people haven't been exposed to it, aren't aware of it, don't understand it, they might struggle with, well, why are we doing this? You know, because
that was actually sorry, Amy, over to you.
I think that's right. I think that's a good point that you've made, Claire, that, you know, is it a reasonable management instruction to say to an employee, you've got to have a test? Okay, well, reasonable management instructions normally relate to their job. Is the test related to the job? Probably not. The only other way to bring it in then is via a policy, okay? And to get a policy in place, you need to consult with your staff. And if you, during that process, are talking to them about the ACAS guidance on this, then you're more likely to get buy-in, aren't you, as opposed to you just randomly imposing these tests because you think that's what you need to do. If they can see that it's coming from a legitimate, independent, you know, organisation, you're going to get more buy-in for that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm now actually doing 2 lateral tests a week, and that's my choice. But I went on and got some of the lateral flow tests because I thought, you know, I'm going to start traveling again, commuting. So as a self-employed person, I do an awful lot of time on the trains, and you know, when I'm in London on tubes and everything else. And I thought, well, you know, for me, and also because I've had COVID, I don't want to get back there again. I want to be able, you know, to protect myself and the people I work with. So if I take a test before I go, and I take a test a couple of days after I get back, then it kind of mentally, for me, I feel better. But I think, sort of translating that to a point you made, Bash, around, if you've got people in your teams that travel to do hotels, hotel visits, site visits, and all that sort of stuff, I think there's a legitimate, reasonable request. It's a reasonable request to say to them, actually, we'd like you to start doing some regular testing for yourself and for the business, particularly if you're doing an awful lot more travel and have more exposure to potential risk.
I was actually going to, I totally agree with that. I think the majority of us and our employees will think it's absolutely reasonable to take the test. I do have a question from Nikki Waters. Before I go on to you, your question, Nikki. Long COVID, Claire, you obviously mentioned you had COVID. Glad to see you're better, but long COVID, what do we do if a member of staff is suffering from it? Do we just treat it as an illness, as a sickness? How do we deal with it?
Again, ACAS have got a code out, guidance note on long COVID. It came out just recently, actually, on the 30th of April. So long COVID, what they mean by that is if you are continuing to have some sort of symptoms 4 weeks, after 4 weeks, basically. The normal, sickness rules apply. If someone is off, they still get sick
architect
and whatnot.
I think somebody's not on mute. I think, let me have a look. Oh, we're back, Amy. Over to you.
It's all, again, the key here is discuss what the impact is on that individual. They might just be feeling extra tired. They might, have more severe impact. Have open dialogue. It may be that you need to implement things like a phased return, reasonable adjustments. The ACAS guide talks about reasonable adjustments. Now, normally when we talk about reasonable adjustments, we talk about them in the context of someone who's got a disability under the Equality Act. So very quickly, what we mean by disability is if someone has a mental or physical impairment that has a substantial and long-term effect on their day-to-day activities. What we mean by long-term is 12 months or more. So in most cases, it's going to be too early to be able to tell you whether they have a disability or not. They may well do. We don't know just yet. But tread with caution and just be reasonable. And
I think ACAS make the point as well, though, and I think it's a really valid point around just being, we talked about disability and Ami's quite right, but actually there is some potential discriminatory issues here as well. And they mentioned particular groups that now data showing have been more affected by long COVID, and that includes women, older people. So, again, you need to be very, very careful how you manage that, because you could actually face claims of discrimination if you treat them if you treat them in the wrong way. Again, it's that reasonableness, and it's that communication and making sure that not one size fits all. You have that open dialogue. And actually, if you know someone has issues with long COVID, it's best to, as it is in any of these things, with anyone who has any condition, it's best to work with them than to actually make an edict and say, no, this is how it's going to be.
Yeah. I think that point echoes to testing as well. Don't single out certain parts of your workforce, for example, Black and ethnic minorities, because they're most likely to get more, or the statistics did show at one point in time that they were more likely to get COVID, and say, right, we're just going to test you. You could, inadvertently open yourself up to discrimination claims. So it's just something to keep thinking about, as ever with all of the things about COVID.
Okay. We're almost out of time. We do have a question from Nikki Waters from Premier. Hello, Nikki. I'll read out your question. This is an excellent question, actually, and I did wonder this myself. What about the anti-vaccinators or even the COVID deniers? Is it more reasonable to ask them for duty of care to their colleagues? What would we do in that situation?
Well, the government have no legal right to insist that anyone gets a vaccination. So if the government can't impose that everyone has this vaccination, then how can employers? Okay, again, it's about encouragement, isn't it? It's about trying them to get to see the benefits of why, but ultimately if they don't, it goes back to the Pimlico plumbers chappie, doesn't it, who a few months ago was saying, if you don't get a jab, you're not going to get a job. It's not as simple as that. why do they need a jab? You know, particularly, for example, if they're working from home, you know, what is the benefit? If you've got COVID secure measures in place, again, why do they need the jab? Think about why they need it, and then decide whether you're going to take this battle on or not. But ultimately, it is possible for you to have such a policy, but you know, and you're going to be able to get that policy in more easily if there's a legitimate reason as to why you're insisting on people get the jab. So again, I make the comparison to the care sector. There's a blatantly obvious reason as to why people should be vaccinated. So Claire, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think, you know, I think the type of businesses that we run and the type of roles that we have, it's going to be very difficult to find a reasonable reason that we would insist that people have vaccinations. I think, you know, you're right. I think there is a duty of care argument there, but I think it's more a case, you know, I do think there's going to be a little bit of maybe peer pressure, but, you know, when people do get back to normal, people will start having those discussions, you know, and people have a right to be anti-vax. They have a right to be COVID deniers. You know, I'd like 5 minutes to talk to them about my experience, but that's by the by. But I think, you know, I think you just have to be very, very wary, as Amy said. And even if you did have a reasonable reason to ask them to be vaccinated, you still have to be aware that, you know, pregnant women maybe, or there's certain groups that, you know, can't have it. There may be, you know, there's a religious argument for some of the vaccines as well, depending on what's in the vaccine. So, you know, there's all these different things that you just have to be aware of. So you can't, you know, you have to you just have to tread really, really carefully. And I would hope that I think it's more for me, it's about educating people and about having those open dialogues to say, you know, it's in your interest to have it if you are able to have it.
Fantastic question, and well answered, ladies. Thank you. I hope that answered you, Nikki. I did have that question in my mind as well, so how on earth do you deal with that? It's a very, very tricky one. So that almost leads us until the end, unless anyone wants to put their hands up, or, oh, here we go. We have a question in the chat room. It's a recruitment question. Asha, from a recruitment perspective, how do you think we attract people back to the travel industry or to the travel industry for the first time in their careers and make them feel secure in their career choice? Cameron, would you like to unmute yourself and unvideo yourself and just explain what you mean a little bit more? Here we go. Hi, Cameron.
Yeah, thanks for that, Buzz. Yeah, it's just a question about when travel starts to return and we need to then recruit possibly quite quickly and make people feel secure about that choice returning to the travel industry after such a volatile year. I just wonder from your perspective, what's the impact going to be? I know some people will be keen to come back, others will be thinking, actually, I've seen some of my contacts maybe start new careers in medicine or other passions. So I'm just wondering from a recruitment perspective, what your views are on that.
Absolutely. If you would have asked me a year ago, I'd have said that there was nothing there. You know, we went, as you all know, it was very difficult in the if hiring staff or from a recruitment perspective. We are seeing green shoots, and every month it is increasing. We're probably working to 20-25% capacity of the roles that we used to work on, but I've also got less headcount. But companies are beginning to recruit again. Companies have begun to recruit since last September. We have lost talent from the industry, which is a real shame and something that we want to try and retain onto that talent. But there are people that are currently looking for employment within the travel industry who are already in jobs because they're now feeling, actually, you know what, I now want to move from travel company A to travel company B because they can see there's movement happening. There are people who are currently on furlough with the fear of potentially being made redundant at the end of furlough that are also looking for employment. And there are people that have been made redundant that are looking for employment. But there are also those individuals that have left the industry. So I don't think the travel industry is one that we need to re-attract people into. We've still got people coming to us saying, we really want to work in the travel industry. How do we get into it? What do we do? So I think the world and consumers can see that people are beginning to travel again. The world is moving again. Therefore, travel companies are getting busy again. To attract candidates to the travel industry, well, it's the best industry in the world, isn't it? I've been in it for over 25, almost 30 years. Best industry, best people. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in it. The opportunities are there, and the opportunities are growing and evolving and happening. There's different types of roles out there as well. Those of you employers out there, and I can see lots of different names that are currently recruiting, they're the ones that are going to get the cream of the candidates, because it is still quite client driven, as in lots of people, not enough jobs, and it's going to slowly move like that, like it always has. So I think to attract people back into the industry, it's evolving, it's moving, people are beginning to move again. And there's so many different sectors. We've talked about TMCs, but there's OTAs, tour ops, technology companies, villa companies, ski companies, you name it. There's the cruise liners. We obviously seen MSC, the first ship coming out of the UK to this morning, this lunchtime virtuoso. Amazing, and that is always, that's so positive for our industry, and that will then make people want to come and work in it. Does that answer your question, Cameron?
Can I add to that, Basha, which is
Yeah.
So, you and I obviously
covered everything.
No, sit on the ICT board, and anyone who knows my work at the ICT will know that this is a real passion of mine anyway, and also my work with GCDP. I think for young talent and emerging talent, we do have a bit of a challenge. And I think that there are a number of people at universities who maybe started their college courses and their tourism degrees and things like that in the last year, who are sitting there going, oh my God, did I make a mistake? There are a lot of people who left college and university last year who came into an industry with no jobs and have had to go elsewhere. And actually what we need to do as a sector is we need to collaborate more in terms of promoting ourselves. And I know, Travel Weekly do a fantastic job with their Takeoff and Travel and promoting the sector, but we really need to get out there wider, talk, and reminding people what a great sector it is. And I think employers need to do more of a kind of employer branding marketing campaign, if you like, to just remind people that this is great. I think people who have left the sector in the last year, I remain optimistic that quite a few of them may come back, as we know a lot of people leave the sector and then think, oh no, made a mistake, and come back. But, on a positive note, they come back with more skills. They come back with different skills that we can utilize. But I think, for the next generation, I think we do have a big challenge, and we need to really, they've seen what was 1 in 9 jobs in the world be decimated, 330 million jobs that have been affected by it globally. But actually, we have to get this consistent messaging and just continue to really start to showcase and get involved with all the different initiatives that are out there, IT Future You being the main one, of course, in promoting our sector to the next generation, and just, reminding them that this is a good choice. And I'm glad, they didn't make the wrong choice, and that we're going to be back, and we're going to be back better.
And I think that's a fair point, Claire. Sorry, Amy, I'll go on to you in a sec. It is looking at, there are some amazing graduates out there that have done the travel and tourism degrees, and a lot of our employers and partners that we work with won't necessarily look at them because they want experience. And it's sometimes maybe look outside the box a little bit and look at the soft skills and the enthusiasm and that kind of thing that the particular candidate, unless it's someone very experienced you're looking for, could bring, because we get approached all the time, don't we, Claire, about from those kind of candidates, from graduates and so on.
But I also would make the point as well. I think, a lot of companies want staff that can hit the ground running. Of course they do, as we start to open up. But actually, there are also new jobs that are becoming available. The one thing that this pandemic has taught us is that many businesses have had to realign and become more agile and really think about, what their skills are, the skills base they need. And actually, so we and I'm sure Basha can confirm this, but certainly what I'm seeing is that there are some new jobs and new skills that are being needed that potentially we don't have in our organisation. So we might struggle to find from the traditional travel industry people. So again, that's opportunities for young people and next generation talent, but we've got to get that messaging right and get that out there.
Especially digital skills, they're ones that we're really
big.
I mean, before we finish, would you like to add something?
Just on that point that you've both talked about, the graduates, the next generation, and this, that, and the other, is there an appetite within the industry? There's a big market of people who've made redundant from other sectors outside of travel. Is that a pool that you think the travel industry will tap into? And because they will have skills of whatever is, whether it be fashion or whatever it is.
Yeah. Online gaming and so on. More and more companies, well, not more, but companies just come on. I'm going to mute them. I have the power, like Jackie Weaver. More and more of our clients, depending on the skill set and the discipline looking for, will look from outside the industry. Of course, if it's a very specific role and you need the experience of a DDS or contacts at wholesalers or whatever, then they'll need to come from the travel industry. But a lot of roles now will look at, like we say, online gaming, online retail, because they can, we can look at a whole different candidate pool, but also they can bring another level of experience and breadth of experience. And when we work with our partners and we advise them, we say, look, if we can't find them from the little pool that we've got, then let's look out, not lower standards, but let's look outside the box a little bit and broaden where we're doing the search from. And I mean, obviously we always look for travel first, but they're not always in that, in that search. So I think we have gone over only by 8 minutes today. I don't think we've got any more questions in the chat room. And just one final comment from you both ladies. What are your plans for the next few weeks? What is it going to be busy? Is it going to be good? And where are you going on holiday? Claire?
Holidays, for me, I mean, as soon as I can, I will, but I do have quite a lot of stuff of work that I'm doing around the return to the office at the moment in particular. So yeah, for me, it's always a balancing act anyway. The earliest I think I can get away is when, fingers crossed, the ITT conference goes ahead in Turkey, and I will go out for that and probably bung on a day or two to just lie by the pool with a large glass of something chilled.
You're going to be extremely busy in the next few weeks then.
Yeah, I am going to be. Yeah, it's really picking up.
And Annie?
Busy, but yeah.
Yeah, similar to Claire, busy. I think I've got quite a few clients now who are focusing on the winter season that's coming up in terms of getting their staff out to European destinations and what that involves and how they go about that. Because this will be the first time that many of them will be doing it post-Brexit. Summer season didn't really happen. So working hard on that. In terms of holidays, nothing booked other than a week in Cornwall in the summer holidays with the kids. So
you managed to get
in. Managed to get to Cornwall.
Well, thank you so much to both of you yet again for your fantastic professional expertise and insight. I'm sure on behalf of everybody in the audience would like to thank you. These ladies are very busy, so your knowledge and everything that you add is extremely appreciated. Thank you to everybody who came today. As I said, it will be recorded and sent on to you, and thanks for Travel Weekly for supporting us as well. We will do another one in a few weeks, a couple of months' time, but I hope you all found it extremely useful, thought-provoking, and you got something from it. And one last thing I'd like to add, Claire and I are starting a Clubhouse Clubhouse chat every other week.
Chat room.
Those of you that know what Clubhouse is, starting next Thursday the 27th at 1 p.m. It will be bi-weekly. Travel industry, people and careers. An hour chat talking about anything in recruitment, employment, HR, and we will be contacting some of you to get involved. Very informal, but we will have some guests on board as well. There'll be an email from my database letting you know all about it, but hopefully we'll get you guys involved and in the audience as well. So thank you very, very much. Luke Pierce, yeah, I'll let you know all about Clubhouse. We've got some comments. Thanks everyone. Shirley, you're welcome. Look at all the comments here. Insightful. It's insightful and interesting. Thank you so much, Amy and Claire. So thank you all. Thank you and good afternoon and have a great few weeks. Thank you very much.
Good luck, everybody. Fingers crossed.
You can stop recording now, Owen.